Here are 4 ways to make your drum room mic sound massive. What's up everybody, Mike here. We all love that big roomy drum sound, right? But when recording in home studios, that can be pretty tough to achieve. Luckily, there are a few things we can do while mixing to help solve this problem. And in this video, we're gonna work our way from much more subtle techniques for when you just need to add a little extra size to your drums, up to some much more dramatic changes. And before we get into the first technique, let's take a quick listen to the room sound we're working with today. I've got a bit of EQ and compression on that, and it's already sounding pretty decent. I've got a kind of medium-sized live room here, but all these techniques will work regardless of where your drum sound is starting. So for this first method, we're actually not going to change the sound of the room mics at all, but instead, we're going to change their relationship with the close mics. I'm using the stock Pro Tools delay set to 100% wet with no feedback or anything like that to make the room mics play back just ever so slightly later. Sound travels at about a foot per millisecond, so by delaying the room mics by 15 or 20 milliseconds, it's kind of like moving the mics 15 or 20 feet farther away from the drums. Let's take a listen to the drums, and I'm going to start with a delay on 0 and slowly bring it up. As I do that, you'll start to hear a more distinct separation between the close mics and the room mics. The close mics will sound a little bit clearer and more defined, and the room mics will sound a little bit bigger. Next, I'm going to grab a transient designer. In this case, I'm using the SPL Transient Designer from Plugin Alliance, and I'm going to shape the room mics to make them sound bigger and more distant. Typically, as you get the room mics farther away from the drums in a big room, the transients will get a lot softer and less clearly defined. By bringing down the attack knob and increasing the sustain, we can mimic this. Let's check it out. If you still need to go bigger with your room sound, for this next technique, grab a room style reverb and insert it straight onto your room mics before any compression. You can experiment with putting this pre or post EQ, either can work, but the key is to have it before the compressor. My favorite reverb for this trick is Seventh Heaven from Liquid Sonics, but there are a bunch that would work, like Valhalla Room or any convolution reverb that has impulses of either recording studios or just medium to large size rooms. If you're using an algorithmic reverb, like Valhalla Room for example, the key is to keep the reverb time pretty short. Like I usually have the best luck somewhere between half a second and a second. Much longer than that, and it stops sounding like a real room and starts sounding like, well, a reverb plugin. Then I typically dial the mix back to maybe somewhere between 30 and 60%. Going too high with the mix once again makes it sound too artificial. By just mixing in a little, it blends in with the actual room sound, especially once you add compression afterwards, gluing them together even more. And finally, for the last technique, I'm going to duplicate my kick in and snare top tracks and place an instance of trigger on each. Then I'm just going to trigger some room samples to blend in. In this case, I'm using some of my own samples, which are available over at bettermixes.com. More specifically, I'm using the room samples from the Bonsai and East kicks and the Barker and East snares. This is one of my favorite ways to use samples. Besides just making the room sound bigger, it's also great for when you've got a drummer who's either not hitting the drums hard enough to really get the room going, or who's hitting the cymbals so hard that they're drowning out the shell sound in the room mics. This allows you to blend in exactly as much kick or snare or tom as you want into the room sound. Let's take a listen to this. I'll start with just the real room and then add in the samples. And finally, let's combine the first, third, and fourth techniques and compare that to the original room sound. I'd love to know which one of these techniques you thought was the coolest, or if you've got any that you used that I didn't mention in this video, I'd love to hear about it. So let me know in the comment section. And if you like this video, you should check out this playlist full of videos on recording and mixing massive drum sounds. And don't forget to head over to bettermixes.com to check out the drum samples I used in this video. There's even a free kit that you can grab. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.